timing is your character so fucking good?
I actually love that people are like, 6-4 cool, 6-4? I think it's close. Like, do any of you guys play the matchup at a high level?
He can't do anything. You can't fucking win. Everything good happens to Fox, always.
You're not shit if you can't triple shine grab on command.
If you think Fox is the best character in the game, you don't understand Melee, you don't understand fighting games, you're a dumbass and your opinion doesn't matter.
You're right, poop oops, I'm fucking Satan spreading Fox propaganda. My main goal in life is to make people fucking hate this character.
Oh, shit.
Today, I want to talk about why Fox is a controversial top tier. Now, I'm not saying he's a bad top tier, I'm not saying he's unhealthy for the game. In fact, I believe that Fox is the healthiest type of top tier. He's a fast, rushdown brawler type. He wants to get up close, and he explodes when he gets hit. Which I think, especially in a game like Melee, makes him very healthy as a top tier, because what we enjoy a lot in our game is optimizing punish game and finding new ways to become more efficient at, killing the other character. And Fox is very, very fun to hit, which is a large part of what makes a healthy top tier in this type of game. But what I believe makes him controversial is specifically one move. You could say 3 moves, because I think there are 2 other significantly less controversial moves that still qualify, and those 2 are Shine and Up Air. They've been talked to death about, which is why I don't really want to cover them in depth here. Obviously, Up Air is a multi-hit, and Shine is Shine and enables the entirety of his kit. The main point with those 2 moves is that they're controversial for different reasons. Shine is exceptionally strong, and I think even Fox mains that underplay the character's strength can see that Shine enables a lot of what makes Fox Fox. The only move I can really see would be an argument for being better is, surprise, surprise, Falco Shine. And Falco Shine is arguably the best move in the game. And, you could still argue that Fox Shine is better because it has a bigger hitbox or, you prefer a knockdown. So, I think Shine is controversial because of its, absolute strength. How much it enables on the character, how unfair it can feel to play against. But Up Air is controversial for a different reason. It's controversial because you can SDI it, but it's also one of the best up airs in the game if you don't SDI it. And this leads to a situation where Fox mains will say, just SDI, bro, just SDI, get out of the move. It's not a big deal, the move isn't that good. I would much rather have Sheik Up Air or whatever. Whereas, other players say, do you know how hard it is to SDI Fox Up Air? Do you know how difficult it is to get out of Fox Up Air? If they, space it correctly? And, yeah, both sides have a point, which is why it's controversial and people talk about it. But I strongly believe, that there is one move which shares a reason with Up Air for being controversial, but that is significantly more so. And that is Fox Downair. Fox Downair is an absurd move on paper, but in practice, it has a few specific weaknesses that makes, Fox players probably underrated slightly, but non-Fox players overrated a lot, I believe. So I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to make this video almost specifically, strictly about Downair, because I believe that Downair is the most interesting move in Fox's kit. Now, why do I believe this? Well, let's go through the frame data first, right? It's a 5-frame startup, it's a multi-hit, it lasts for 49 total frames, 3 frames shield stun, and, the base damage is pretty low, it's not egregious. The landing lag, 9 frames, not egregious. Auto cancel never comes into play pretty much. And then the note at the bottom of this page is active frame 1 frame at a time with 2 frame breaks, 8 hits total. That part is very important because the fact that it has a 2 frame window where, or rather, with 2 specific windows that are large enough means that you can actually buffer a jump out of shield from this. And this is really important because it means that you can force an airborne interaction versus Fox, which is something I'll go into more detail later in the video, but it's a very, unknown secret for counterplaying Fox's Downair. I brought it up in a really old video about buffer jump, but I thought I'd mention it here as well. But that's not necessarily why it's controversial. It's specifically the fact that SDI is so effective against it. And I think the reason that other players that don't play Fox struggle against this move is that they don't really know what to do after they hit the SDI. So I wanted to go over that. I wanted to cover sort of like the axis of counterplay, like what do you do against Downair from both sides, and yeah, go through it real quick. So let's start with that. So what I've got here is a regular Downair Shine. This is a regular Downair Wave Shine. You've seen this 100 times before. I make sure to space it somewhat inside Marth. Now, how could Marth counterplay this? Well, there's a few things, right? Obviously, he can SDI, which is what we're going to show first. But what I want you to notice here is the hidden secret interaction that I believe makes this move controversial. Can you spot it? Let me show that again. Let me show that again. Can you see here what makes this move controversial? Compare that to the first one. Can you tell what the difference is? I'll say it. The difference is that with just 1 or 2 SDI inputs, Marth gets to shield. Even though Marth is in range of the Shine, Marth still gets shield up in time. And this, I believe, is the main thing that Foxes should complain about with this move, so to speak. I think this is a large reason the move is sort of overrated. If you couldn't fairly consistently end up in the situation where you get shield up in time, like this, then I don't think the move would be, you know, underrated. Or overrated, rather. I think the hitting a full SDI that gets you far enough away where the Shine doesn't hit you, because this is important, right? Shine actually does hit Marth here. Shine actually does connect with Marth's feet here, even though it might not look like it. If Marth doesn't shield here, he still gets hit on the feet because he's not far enough away. But because he gets time to shield, because, you know, he gets a bigger frame gap, that lets him get out for free. And this gives you the strongest counterplay option against Shine that covers the most amount of things, right? Which specifically, in this case, is pressing shield after you SDI and then spamming A for grab. Because this covers him like wave dashing in both sides, and he can't really do very much to get out of this. And as you can see here in the second clip, this is me SDIing through. This works both directions. Whereas if I SDI through, sometimes the Fox will drift too far and, you know, the Shine won't even connect. That doesn't matter. You can still just grab it like this. And the important part is if you shield and the Shine barely hits your shield, it doesn't really matter, because from that position, from a max spaced Shine on shield, Fox cannot threaten you. Fox can't hit you with like a Nair or another Downair or anything like that, and he's frequently facing away in this clip, but you know, in practice you can do this on both directions, either away or through him. And in both cases, he'll be too far away to effectively punish you, which means that you can just reliably press shield into press A into get the grab. And this interaction works really reliably versus Fox. So this is the main counterplay you want to do. But obviously, doing this in practice can seem a bit hard, a bit daunting. Which is why we need to get into how CC works, right? Because one reason people don't do this enough is because they don't want to SDI away. They don't want to SDI away and end up getting hit by, you know, Nair, getting sent really far off stage, or they don't want to press in because then they're suddenly doing a combo DI, or rather, you know, the worst possible combo DI, which you don't want either, right? So what you really want to do is abuse the fact that you can SDI through Fox and also CC Nair. If you're doing like a dash through Fox or you're doing like an approach, if you wiggle the stick forward and down, you are going to SDI Fox there and CC Nair, which, you know, at mid and low percent just beats both pretty much. And obviously he can delay the Nair, get a low please let me say that again. He can do a low Nair, and the low Nair has good enough frame data that it doesn't matter. He still gets, you know, frame advantage. You can't really just like grab him for free. And Fox has counterplay, because Fox, I believe in NTSC at least, is likely the strongest character in the game, or guaranteed top 3 at the very least, right? Like, I'm not arguing that he's not the strongest or among the strongest. But that interaction is such a large reason that people rate him differently, because Fox mains generally have a at least subconscious idea of how this works. The reason they do is because they've been hit by it. I think a lot of players do this accidentally every now and then. But I would like to see a future where people actually go into Uncle Punch or go into 20xx or whatever training software you use and practice this, because it's so important versus the character. And then the fourth thing is that he can actually just lose to aerial approaches with this. And they don't even have to be, they don't even have to be jumping late, right? Like in this clip here, they jump almost the same frame. But as soon as, the Marth goes airborne, he's barely even SDIing. I think he's just holding away here. And, you hold away and you get far enough away that you get the grab. And this is important to realize, right? That it loses to SDI through, SDI away, jumping, and it loses to buffer jump out of shield, which I will show later on. But talking about this, you realize that it's not a quote-unquote consistent move. And the lie there, of course, is that this requires you to be on the ball constantly. And here we have to get into the mental stack, right? I've mentioned this before. I think it's a very valuable term, but I'll, briefly explain it. The mental stack is the term used to describe how much you have to think in a game, how much mental effort you have to exert in order to do something, or, consider the game state. When you're a new player, a lot of the game is just overwhelming to you. There's too many things to consider. But as you optimize and, get experience, you learn what you have to consider and what you don't have to consider. And as such, you decrease your mental stack, so you have more space to add new things. You can start thinking about your opponent. How does my opponent like to play? How do I play against that? Whereas a new player might still be thinking, how do I wave dash? And all you're doing there is changing what you have to put on your mental stack and what ends up being automatic, right? In the same way, Fox Downair is a incredibly hard move to beat from a mental stack perspective. At least currently, when people haven't gotten this down to like a science where they do it every time. And because of that, you end up in a spot where it feels really inconsistent to get out of Fox Downair. It is technically possible almost always, but it's still a mix-up in that, for example, on the SDI through here, Fox could have drifted back. And, would probably have hit this. But the issue with that is that if he drifts back and you did no SDI, suddenly the shine doesn't connect anyway. Or you hit one SDI away and you're out. So it becomes a read, right? There are 3 different drifts Fox can do, like most of the time. He can drift back, he can drift forward, and he can drift in place. And you kind of have to guess which one you have to do. And then you have to hit the shine, and then you have to combo them. Now, there are many points of failure there. First of all, which way did they SDI? Did they SDI correctly? Then they're out. Then they get the reversal a lot of the time. Did they not SDI out? Okay, cool. Did you try to read an SDI and drift incorrectly? Well, now you don't hit them. Which is why, by the way, people don't really do that currently. Most of the time now, you just hit the Downair where they are, and you drift to where they are. Because doing that, that means that they have the execution barrier. They have to prove that they can SDI reliably, and most people can't, so it's just by far the most reliable option. Why would you read and drift through, or, read a SDI through, when it's far more likely that they simply won't SDI at all? But on paper, they can just do, SDI every single time, which is why this is hard to talk about, because I recognize that in practice, that's never going to happen, even though we might get closer to that. So it's always going to be weighted towards doing the Downair to where they are right now and not reading where they're going to SDI. Regardless, you guessed correctly there. Now you still need to hit the shine combo. And the interesting part here is they can SDI, but not SDI far enough to get out. And the issue here is you can't react to which side of you they are. If they SDI towards the end, like obviously here it's really easy, right? Like when they hit the SDI on this one, he hits the SDI immediately. I'm fairly sure it's possible, even though it's pretty dang hard to react to this. If you like look as soon as he starts teleporting where he's going, right? See, he goes out, and he's already behind you. There's quite a few frames until you land here, so it's probably possible, but regardless, it's extremely difficult, so just assume that in most cases you won't be able to tell. And it's important to note that if they are only hitting an SDI towards the end of the move, then, you know, you don't have time no matter what. So I think it's just best to assume that you can never tell which way they're going to SDI here and react to which side of you they are. But regardless, you look at the end of the move, and then you hit the shine, and then you now have to guess which side of you they're on, and then you have to wave shine in that direction and hit the punish. So on the Fox's side, there are at least 2 layers of guesses involved, and then they also have to hit the execution demand on the actual punish, which is, you know, obviously every top level Fox can hit this fairly reliable, but it's still part of the mental stack, it's still part of the process, which is why it's not as brain dead as you'd like it to be, preferably, right? Like if you hit a Nair, you know it knocks down, you know it's a tech chase, you just do it. You don't really have to consider anything. And the actual execution is mostly tied to hitting the dash back, which is, you know, controller dependent. It's not something you have to think about in addition to that. It's just you do it and that's it. It's done. And Fox Downair is never really like that, right? So that, to me, is part of why the move is overrated for non-Fox mains. But at the same time, you look at the Fox mains and they say that just SDI every time. And the answer is, how? Like, do you SDI every time? If you watch a Fox Ditto, does the Fox SDI out of Downair every time to get out? No, they don't. Like, you have to practice what you preach, which is why I'm currently practicing this as much as I can, but, you know, still. So I will recognize that the move is pretty difficult to accurately rate, and it varies from matchup to matchup. I use Marth here to cheat a little bit, because in this spot, when Marth SDI is this far behind, a lot of grabs would just whiff, right? Like, on the other player's end, they have to recognize around what distance they're going to end up at and do the correct move from there. Which is why I think this type of SDI, where you SDI through, I don't think this is nearly as much of a threat compared to the first one, where you just SDI away like this. Because on this one, you still, you know, you only need to hit 1 or 2. You're going to end up close enough to Fox that every grab is going to hit here. Like, there's no character, pretty much, except maybe Pichu, that doesn't get a grab from this. So, this, I think, is far more of a concern. The fact that hitting just 1 SDI early on, or being slightly misspaced, leads to this happening, and, you know, you're out and get to shield beforehand. That is the main reason it's bad. But regardless, all of these combined make this move not quite as good as the, you know, Fox haters think, but also not quite as bad as the Fox apologists think. I think it's super interesting, because if this move didn't exist, I think it would be extremely easy to rate Fox, but this move is the source of, like, all his controversies, right? Like, I think this move is responsible for so much, because it's arguably one of the strongest ways to beat CC in the game. It comes out extremely fast, it links into his shine, it, you know, links into his grab even, it links into up tilt as well. Like, it's so reliable if SDI didn't exist. And then SDI exists and messes it all up. So that's why Fox is a controversial character, because this move exists. Now, finally, I want to cover buffer jump. Buffer jump is when you press C stick up to jump out of shield. And you do this because C-stick buffers the input out of shield, frame 1. So if you're trying to shield the move and you hold C-stick up, you will always jump the first possible frame at the end of the move. It bears... I haven't repeated it, I haven't said it yet. It bears mentioning that if you buffer jump too early, you will jump in the middle of the move, which just gets you hit because you don't have enough time to get airborne. The reason this happens is because he has a gap in his Downair, right? We mentioned this earlier. So you have to wait with the C-stick input until the end of the move. You can see on the input display at the top here, when I press the C-stick up, you see I wait until, like, around when the move ends. But I do just press shield early. Now, that's what buffer jump is. It has a ton of applications, and especially it's useful because if you're willing to take a 1 frame loss, you can do it in situations where you actually weren't shielding at all, because then you spend 1 frame shielding and then you jump the frame after. So, for example, on Wake Up, say you're doing a tech option and you don't want to shine on Wake Up because you're afraid that they're gonna, be there with a move, but you also don't want to spot dodge because also you don't want to just get dash dance grabbed. Then having the option to just jump, even if it's 1 frame later than normal, 100% consistently, can be really useful. And, same thing with maybe like doing a run-in shield, or there's a ton of different situations where having the option of jumping perfectly, or rather 1 frame off perfectly, is pretty convenient. So buffer jump, very useful, highly recommend you use it, but especially versus Downair here, we're gonna go through the various use cases. First of all, I'll show you what happens if you just buffer jump. This is nothing after buffer jumping. We just see Marth buffer jumping and he gets out like this. This is one of the ways this can happen. Where the Fox was slightly too late on the shine and now it doesn't hit you and, you're out. The issue with this, of course, is Marth doesn't really want to be above Fox. Thankfully, look at how high he gets before Fox is actionable. Obviously, not every Fox is gonna default to doing up smash after this, because you can just look at the screen while you're doing the wave dash and react to this. But he's still not out of the wave dash lag, and he is going to do shine wave dash because that's what you do. It's pretty hard to do anything else if you're not just like Mango, who's known for being able to mix that up. But assume most players are going to go for the default Downair, shine, wave dash. And with that assumption, Marth can kind of like he's on the way down. Fox can't really threaten him in a good way for having done this jump. And of course, if there are top platforms or side platforms, it's even easier to get out. So if this happens, it's not ideal, but it's also not bad. It just got you out of trouble for free, pretty much. What's the second scenario? In the second scenario, you get hit airborne like this. This is very, very common. The slower your jump squad is, the more common it is. Fox Downair has 7 frames of delay until the shine comes out. There's a 7-frame gap at best. Actually, I don't remember if the fully unstale one is 6 frames, but I'm fairly sure it's 7 frames and then 8 frames if it's stale. So everyone except Bowser can do this pretty much. You jump, and if your jump squad is 5 or 6 frames even, you'll get out. Because you get airborne for 1 frame, and then this probably happens. So the faster your jump squad is, the more likely it is that you just get the jump out and you don't get hit by shine. So for Fox, in the Fox Ditto, this is really powerful because obviously Fox full jump is broken. So having the option of, getting the SDI and then jumping and then falling on them with a falling up or whatever, very strong. He's so fast on the way down that it just becomes a menacing mix-up. Whereas, maybe Falco, you primarily use it to get away and even then, you would just get knocked down by the shine, so he doesn't really get that much use out of it compared to, say, a Peach or a Sheik or a Marth or whatever, and they all sort of interact differently. A Sheik is rarely going to get hit by the shine, but a Marth gets hit a lot of the time, even though the first one I showed, he jumped above, it took a bit to set that up, but I actually hit the shine most of the time. So regardless, here's what it looks like when this happens and you do nothing afterwards. Doesn't look that bad, right? You see the Marth, he's landing not too early here compared to, when the Fox hits. So it's not that big of a gap, right? But he can still, as it turns out, roll away. And if he rolls behind, then he gets the punish. What else can he do? Well, we're gonna get to that in a second. Yeah, he can just dash dance, and then he gets out. If there's enough space here, he doesn't really even have to dash dance like this. If there's enough space here, he can sort of just dash and then, delay the dash back. He doesn't have to dash back until he can look and see that Fox has committed. So you can dash away, and if there's enough space on the stage there, you can just dash away, look at the screen. Did Fox commit to the up smash? We're grabbing that. It's really reliable, low risk. So if there's enough space, I recommend you just dash away. And then, the final thing, he can just shield and wave dash out, grab it, like this. So all of these beat the option, right? So if you get shield out, Downair is also not that good. And this is super underutilized. I know only a handful of players who use this in their games. And a lot of them are people I've told them to use this because, it's so easy to execute. It requires no, like, hard inputs whatsoever, but it's just not known about well enough. So I really hope that people start making use of this. And again, when I argue that Fox's Downair is overrated, I include stuff like this, which means that in practice against 99% of players, Fox Downair is completely broken because they neither SDI nor do this, and you kind of need to do both if you want to, you know, sort of deal with the move in a good way. And I will mention, compared to SDI, this is way lower execution. Like, for SDI, you need to time it, you usually need to hit multiple inputs if they space it well. Here, press shield, C-stick up, and you're good. That's it, you've done it. Amazing. So this is way lower execution, and it works on a lot of other moves, not just this. Like, I use this versus a ton of moves you wouldn't expect. I use it versus Fox Shine when I'm in the Ditto. So like, they do Shine, and I think they're gonna Shine grab. I just jump beforehand, and I'm out, and then I land on them and kill them. I use it in versus Sheik. If they like F-tilt me, and it's like a tipper, like pretty far away, I tend to do just buffer jump, and what happens then is, if they did another move afterwards, I just perfectly land on them, and it like works pretty reliably. So a lot of those situations where you can find use for it, it's not just versus Fox's Downair, but I think this is one of the most important use cases, because it really does make the matchups a lot better. But regardless, I wanted to showcase this, because I so rarely see it used. I will say a word of warning, this one specifically, where he shields, be very, very careful. In this clip, I actually have to shield the eye in, because if I don't shield the eye in, I go so far that the wave dash puts me just barely off stage, and you know, you get the awkward air dodge where you just die. Whereas if I shield the eye in, I barely get to do the wave dash out. So be careful if you're close to ledge, and I would rather do the like roll through. Like, I think primarily doing the roll through or the dash back are the two most reliable options, but I think that the roll through is especially underrated. So those are like the main ways to deal with Fox's Downair. I will just let this play out in the background, but I just have some final words, I suppose. This is such an interesting case study in like how it's difficult to rate a character. Because first of all, the knowledge isn't publicly accessible. Not very many people know about all of these factors together. And also, applying them is really difficult. Everything I mentioned here, getting to the point where you use it all in practice, very, very difficult. Getting to use one or two, pretty easy. That will probably only take you like a couple hours, like 1 or 2 hours. But making like proper use out of all of this, not only does it take a lot of time to learn, it's also very demanding inside a match, which is why it's unfair to just say, hey, the move sucks, the move is awful. Like, Fox Downair, look at it, I'm invalidating it. It's not like even that good. That's not really a fair thing to say either, right? Because it turns out, no, the move is pretty good. It's just hard to rate these types of things, right? So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I hope this was interesting. I've wanted to discuss this move in depth for a long time, and I finally got a chance to do it. So if you enjoyed, please subscribe, and you know, support me. And yeah, that's it. Have a good one. Bye!